And good afternoon. It's Monday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's time for the dialogue. We are live. Dialogue with Dozie is on the air. I'm just trying to check, Madam Producer, are we good? Because I'm not seeing, I'm still seeing the old screen. Okay. Are we good, Madam Producer?
Good to go. We're good to go.
Okay, Madam Producer, I'm seeing the screen of the intro. I'm seeing myself just in the background. Are we good? Okay, I'm still trying to work through some things here. Okay. Trying to get a confirmation that everything's well. Okay. It's Monday night, Dialogue with Dozie. We are live and we're so glad that you are with us tonight and we're grateful. One of the more consequential shows that you'll ever see on the Dialogue. I was told to tone down my energy and enthusiasm because 2020 was such a tragic year. Part one of the show last week was somewhat tragic. It was marred with technical difficulties and delays, and thankfully we're back up and got it together. And tonight for part two, to look back at the year that was 2020, it was also the year that the dialogue premiered, and we're going to celebrate that over into next month now. Glad to have been picked up by the Go Giga team. My dear daughter, Madam Producer, Latoya Glenn, and her team of Toya and Markia and team. So glad about that. But we'll deal with that week after next. We want to talk tonight about what a year 2020 was. And when I was putting this show together, I had in the back of my mind, I know I had heard in recent days somebody said that I'm a bona fide historian. And it caught my ears, and I thought it was somebody that I heard in person, because I'm a student of history myself. I didn't study it as a discipline, but it would have been a minor had I chose such in college. And while on a Faith in Florida podcast last week, as soon as we signed on, it came to me. It's this brother right here. He's going to be by my side. KB's not here tonight. He's by my side to help us look back. His name is Brother Marlowe Jones. Marlowe is the Faith in Florida organizer in Pasco County. He's the organizer of the Black Lives Matter movement over in Pasco County, and he's also he's the founder of the African American Club. Brother Marlowe Jones, how you doing, bro?
Brother Dozell, I am doing so well. Thank you so much for having me on. What a pleasure it is to be with you today, my brother.
Well, I mean, thank you for being on, and I'm a little handicapped tonight because I'm used to seeing us all on screen, and I'm not having that. I'm not seeing that. I'm seeing, but thank you so much, and for such a show, there could not have been a better person to join us. Well, just originally, do you have any comments you want to say to the audience? Do we call it Dozie Land, or anything you want to say? Any comments just before we get into some of the props leading, talking about 2020, anything you want to say to us? Or anything
yeah, absolutely. I want to say hello to all the Dozie Land fans out there in the United States and around the world that are listening. Thank y'all for listening. Continue to listen and support my brother and all the wonderful things that he is talking about on this wonderful show. And I can't wait just to keep hearing about all the great things that is going on with this wonderful, wonderful news and this outlet. I love it. And I'm here for it, and I support.
Thank you very, very kindly. So wonderful news. Okay. I'm having to look at another thing for a monitor because the monitor is not showing, but okay, I'll just look at this and this will help me. I can see what's going on. So Marlowe, 2020 was such a year. And at the end, please remind me, we're going to come back and we're going to compare it to 1968. I happen to have been around in the parallel where the show startling. But before we start the night show, we want to dedicate it to Mr. Junior Bridgman. Junior Bridgman is he left us on last Tuesday. He is a former University of Louisville basketball player. He is a former pro player, played with several teams. Most of his career was spent with the Milwaukee Bucks. And we salute him. Basketball players, there are many basketball players, and as you know this show, you know I'm a big fan of the NBA. And those guys are kind of like somebody that I really look to. But what I really like about Junior Bridgman is that he parlayed a good career in the NBA and a great college career, a good pro career. But what he did after was that he parlayed his money. He bought a couple of Wendy's franchises. With their success, he parlayed them over into becoming quite the restaurateur. And he was one of the first Black former athletes who was categorized as a billionaire. And in fact, Shaquille O'Neal said that he was the one. He had just spoken to him a day or two before. Junior Bridgman was in Louisville giving. He was speaking to a group of young business professionals, and he happened to reach down and he just got sick. We'll say he incurred a medical emergency, and he suddenly left us. And people like him are inspiration to people like myself, because to be able to have a great skill, do something that you love doing, but then to parlay it and not blow your money, waste your money, to grow your money and then pour back into the community as he did with so many people. We know what Shaq and others have done. Shaq is on the cusp of billionairehood, and he said Junior Bridgman was his mentor in the financial community. And so tonight, the dialogue salutes Junior Bridgman, and our prayers are with his family and friends, all the people in the Louisville area. And we just want to prop him out tonight and send our loving prayers to his family. We're going to go right to the videotape. As we say, that's the old Warner Wolf thing. The first thing, 2020 was very. It was never a dull moment, and the first thing that hit us was the loss of our dear friend, Mr. Kobe Bryant. Kobe also had really gained quite a following in his post NBA career, and he was what most of us would consider the ultimate girl dad. And let's just go to the first clip and see what occurred early in late January of 2020, which was the start of a very, very tough year.
Good afternoon from New York. We're coming on the air with breaking news, very sad news to tell the sports world. The LA Times is reporting that retired Los Angeles Lakers basketball star Kobe Bryant has been killed in a helicopter crash. It happened this morning. The chopper reportedly went down just before 10 a.m. local time, according to the fire department out there in Calabasas, California. That's northwest of Los Angeles. You can see the picture there. It burst into flames on impact, starting a nearby brush fire. The 41-year-old Kobe Bryant was reportedly traveling with 4 others in that aircraft, in that helicopter. The LA County Fire Department saying all 5 people perished in the crash. At the time of the accident, there were foggy conditions in that area that may have diminished visibility. Bryant leaves behind a wife, Vanessa, and 4 daughters. He was, of course, one of the most legendary players.
As it turns out, Marlowe, it was 7 people on board. He and his daughter Gianna, and 5 additional people. There was another man and his daughter that was amongst that group. What are your initial impressions of that tragedy, Marlowe?
You know, growing up as a millennial, when I initially heard of that, I'm not going to lie, I was heartbroken. And then once I heard more of the developing story, that he was with his daughter, I then thought about my daughters. And then my heart started to hurt more. And then once I found out there were other families with their children on board, I became very depressed. It was just like a nightmare. It was one of those things where I just wished this was fake news. I just wished it was not real because it was a tragedy. And they were on their way to go to a basketball game doing something they love. You know, I love seeing Kobe in retirement, enjoying his life with his family. And when I first heard about that, it just, it's like one of those times in history or in time where everything just slows down.
Yeah.
And you mourn. And it's very rare. Very rare. It's almost like the same thing that happened when the late Princess of Wales, Diana, died.
Yes.
The whole world was traumatized. When Michael Jackson died, John F. Kennedy, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X. It's like these things stop people in time and they make us all just slow down for a minute and just realize how precious life is. And it's so sad that it's 2020 just seemed like yesterday, but I draw hope and strength from seeing how his wife and his children have carried on and how so many people have supported them and doing the best they can to help them through this difficult period, because they lost a father, a husband, a mother, a son, a brother.
I was coming home from church, and we I think we were going out to eat while we were still on down in the south end of Broward County in the Dania Hollywood area, and any chance I get, we always whip around through the beach on the way home. And I was just leaving the joy of seeing the people in this, around the beach, because it was a little cool. And my brother texted me and asked me had I heard about Kobe, and I said no. And he said he went down on the chopper, and we know those are things that you usually don't survive. I immediately went to the news and I was just absolutely stunned. Your reaction and mine was one that was sensed around the whole country. But let's just look at how some of his NBA brothers, how their reaction to what occurred when they found out about it. So the stunned reaction of his brothers, whom he had just recently retired from participating with on a normal seasonal basis, and Sunday, even though the NBA season was the NFL was in its playoffs, Sunday still had its share of some NBA attention, and that was just a reaction that was seen across the association, as they call it. And of course, Shaquille O'Neal, I think he had a very poignant reaction. And we know the history of their relationship that was just in repair. Comment on the other side of this video, if you please, would, Marlowe.
Yeah, looking at that video, you can see that everybody was physically and emotionally moved. I thought about that as I was watching that video. Kobe is almost like the end of an era. The Black Mamba is gone. And I felt like all those people that they were showing, they had some close relationship with Kobe, and he inspired them in some way, because everybody that played with Kobe or versed him was inspired by him. You know, his work ethic was not like nobody could match it. And I just think in that time, from what I could see, people were just physically and emotionally just not there. I don't even think some of them could have even continued to play the game because he meant so much to the game. He meant so much, not just to the game, but to the culture.
Devin Booker was the first that we saw in that clip, and he was a youth when Kobe was in his heyday, and Kobe had basically personally mentored him through that Mamba Academy, where he was headed to that day to see Gianna play and coach a girls' game with her team. Let's hear what Shaquille O'Neal had to say about it, his former teammate.
Shaq, you're the first guy I thought of when I heard this news the other day. Of course, I talked to you and Charles and Kenny later that afternoon, but then I saw that you had gotten a text from Kobe that morning, or Sharif had gotten one. How have you been over the last 48 hours, man?
Well, as you know, it's already been the last couple months been really tough. Lost my little sister. Haven't been sleeping. Haven't been doing the normal things I usually do. I work, we laugh, we kid, we joke. When I get back home and look at reality and say she's gone, it just hurts. So the other day I'm downstairs working out with my son Shakir and my nephew Columbus. And my other nephew comes in crying and he shows me his phone. And I snapped at him. I said, man, get that out of my face. Just get it away from me. You know, we live in a world where anything can be photoshopped, anything can be hoaxed. I didn't want to believe it. And then I got the call from you, Charles, Kenny, everybody called me. And then we found out it was confirmed. And haven't felt the pain that sharp in a while. 47 years old, lost two grandmothers, lost a Sarge, lost my sister, and now I lost a little brother.
This was almost painful to even relive because the poignancy, the reality of it hits as though, like you said, it was yesterday. As most of us know, Shaq he and Kobe's relationship had just gone into repair.
Yeah.
Because there were so many years that they were estranged. Everybody said it was Kobe who ushered Shaq out of LA. Kobe would come on down here and win a title, but he had his moments through the rap songs and so forth. But they had just kind of repaired that relationship. And TNT, in fact, and NBA TV, and that's still available for those, on demand through most cable systems, where they came together and reunited. It was very, very poignant. And then that night, this was, I think, day 3 after the tragedy. That would have been a Tuesday night, or NBA TNT night. And they had the whole team, Barkley, and the reactions of Barkley and Dwayne Wade, and those were there. And Barkley's reaction was just as sad and poignant. And of course, you heard Shaq relate that he had just gone through a season of loss and had not suffered, that kind of pain. That was just the start of what was kicking off to be a real different kind of year. Before we could really get through that, things started happening. We discovered that in this nation there was and here's the light doing what it does. We discovered in this nation that there was a virus that had emanated, and it was called the coronavirus. And the first instance of it was detected, and then first we had the coronavirus occur, and then on February 29th, the first death was confirmed here in the United States. And that dominated the next 2 or 3 years of the world. It was a pandemic, which meant that the whole world and the reaction and everything that occurred in this nation was some of the things that kind of was the backdrop to what was really a lot of crazy stuff that happened. Let's see this from ABC News.
Good Sunday morning. America's recognition of the coronavirus crisis we now face seems to have grown about at the same pace the virus itself has spread, slowly at first, then exponentially. As of this morning, there were roughly 3,000 confirmed cases of the coronavirus in the U.S., resulting in 60 deaths. But there has been very limited testing, so those numbers may be way off.
So, Marlowe, what was your reaction to the virus when it first kicked in, or we started hearing about it, or at least the first death? What are your remembrances?
My remembrances of I paid close attention to like what's going on in the world. I follow a lot of world politics and just world news in general. And there had been some concern of mine with meetings that were being convened by members of Congress, high-ranking members. And I knew something was a little off when a lot of them started purchasing large numbers of stocks and certain biometrics and different things like that. Then we started to hear that this virus had came and it was airborne. My first initial reaction was, okay, maybe this is like the flu or something like that. But once I started seeing the seriousness of COVID and how it was, people were dying from it, it was a shock. It was a real shock. I was worried. I had a daughter in the middle of COVID in 2020. So I was concerned about her and her mother and their health and how that would all be, because things were different. It wasn't like post-COVID where, you go to the hospital, everything was normal. Now everything was different. It was like almost a lockdown type of feeling. So I was very worried initially because I have children, and I have grandparents and family members that, have pre-existing conditions. So I was very worried, especially for my community.
One of the things that occurred that was that we'll always look back to, and I think it was one of the major influencers in the presidential election, and we'll talk a little bit more in depthly about that shortly, was America's slow reaction to it, as far as really taking the precautions. Now, that was an aspect that I hadn't looked. You were seeing some of the things behind the scene, and of course, if you had some Zoom stocks right along there while they were still cheap, a brother could become a millionaire almost instantly because when life got shut down. But it was the overall reaction and the slow reaction. Do you remember? And do you remember what your impressions were about how slowly we reacted to it and really started taking the precautions?
Yeah, I think we reacted slowly to it because our government at the time was downplaying it. They were literally telling people, in the world, in America, that this was really nothing serious. It's okay. Everything's under control. So I think that initial downplaying of the virus by certain political parties and political people, I think that harmed a lot of people because it spread this thing called misinformation. So a lot of people weren't prepared. They didn't really understand it. They didn't know. And then I don't think people really started to really understand things until they were told, hey, we can't go anywhere. You can't go to work. Everything locked down, shut down. Then people started feeling, wait a minute, what? Because humans don't like being confined to a box. It's not in our nature.
Yeah. I think that kind of one of the things as we look back in retrospect, we had the CDC that was giving what we, in our lifetime, we had never known the full value, I guess, of the CDC. And they were trying to consult the administration on how we should react and what precautions we could take. and that was a hesitation on the part of the administration. And I don't know, I just thought that everything was too economically driven to care about public safety. What do you remember about that?
I do believe so, especially living in Florida. I remember more like, like you've seen certain states kind of shutting down and like taking precautions because they were seeing how the virus was spreading. It was airborne. You could get it by touching the surface. You could get it from someone basically breathing on you. But you started to see how capitalism played a role in not really caring, especially in Florida. Like our governor decided he was going to keep Florida open. We knew that this virus thrived in particular climates. So you had a lot of people that were escaping the northern states and other states that had went into complete lockdown, and a lot of people that were sick all coming to Florida. And, they kind of had this don't really care policy. We're keeping Florida open. We think COVID is a hoax, blase, blase. And that type of behavior, and when it became economic, like when you still wanted to keep things open that probably should not have been open, that's when you knew, like, okay, they're prioritizing dollars over people.
Do you think that I'll just say it, I really try, and when we get through these series of programs, I'm gonna have to face some of the things that's going on head on. I try not to call this guy's name, but you think the Trump administration's focus, do you think that they directly help escalate us to get to 1 million deaths before the end of the calendar year because of their slow reaction?
100% without a doubt. I mean, here you think the leader of the strongest nation on earth, who was getting briefings on this, who received briefings on this virus 4 or 5 months before we even knew what was going on. They knew what was going on. But you have to understand, to them and to that administration, it was about control. And they wanted to control the narrative, because if a bunch of people know the truth, then they're not going to be caring about the building a wall and all those fairy tale things. The Trump administration, and we're going to be candidly honest to the American people, we have to be honest. They have to take accountability, because, I mean, the press conferences where you had doctors speaking to the American people, and then he's contradicting the doctors and telling people to zap themselves with Lysol. I mean, these types of things, people were really taking this stuff seriously and going home and doing these things that he was saying. And, myself personally, I had family members pass away. My grandmother passed away in a nursing home. And,
wow.
And it was one of the most horrible things ever, because in our community and our culture, we're used to having, access to our family members when we're visiting them. We're used to being able to make sure they're okay. Well, when COVID happened, everything changed. Everything was locked down. Only one person could come in. And it was to a point where no one could come in the nursing homes. So I think about that all the time, how my grandmother passed away basically alone,
You're the first person that I know who actually, we had a friend of the family, my brother Kim, who we do the show together. One of his best friends, we lost him, and I knew John real well. And then a local mortician down here had a long stretch of COVID before he was a younger guy in his mid-50s, passed after a long, and those were just very, very poignant and hitting for me. Because of the preconditions, my wife really made me turn my house into a man cave, and going to, I walked with a friend. We walked down to one of the golf courses that were, of course, closed at the time. We would walk a couple days a week, and we stayed on either side of the cart path when we walked. And then we also, I wasn't going anywhere, but if I had to go to get gas, that was almost like a field trip, because I go down to Hollywood to the reservation or and would get gas and that would last me months. I only did it 2 or 3 times the whole month of 2020 because I basically went nowhere. Going to the grocery store was like going to a field trip. Going down there was like going out of town. We're going to talk more about the coronavirus and its effect in America's or the Trump administration's slowful reaction to it. But we're going to take a break and we'll be right back. There were a lot of social justice issues which drove 2020, and we're going to talk more about those in just a second. My guest is my brother, historian Marlowe Jones. We'll be right back. You haven't contacted Go Giga yet, and you're doing virtual work. You saw their website. You see their address. Contact them right now. They make this boy look good. They've been doing this show for 5 years. Got our numbers ascending, and just great things. Don't hesitate. Contact them right away. That's to the Go Giga team. They got all of your virtual needs. They got all of your web building, all of your web, anything that can market you and purport your brand. The Go Giga team got it. That's Go Giga Creations, GoGigaWorld.com. Check them out right now. They got you. Listen, through all of the madness as we look back at 2020, we don't want to forget that this is Women's History Month. And tonight, the dialogue spotlights Mother Teresa of Calcutta. Mother Teresa was a saint indeed. She left us at the age of 87 after donating a life. And I say donating. The scriptures speak of he who is greatest among you, he or she who is greatest amongst you will be your servant. Hers was a life of sacrifice and servitude. I think we in America began to learn more about her during the AIDS crisis, when she brought worldwide attention to it and made it known that it was more than just what we thought was just a gay man's disease. And when she started bringing attention to the children around the world, particularly in Africa and the lesser affluent nations that were dying of the virus for various reasons. And I think she just ascended to become a saint around the world. And if anything, she is the epitome of what scripture talks about, or any scripture through the Hindu, the Talmud, the Quran, the Muslims' Quran, all religions. It did not matter that she happened to be a Christian or Catholic, in fact, but the fact that servitude, being a blessing to humankind, and the fact that she was a lady, we just salute Mother Teresa of Calcutta tonight, and we just salute. And when you start talking about great human beings who have graced this earth, it's hard not to think about her being in your top 5. That's Mother Teresa. We're so grateful that the Almighty graced this world with the likes of her. We're back with my brother Marlowe Jones, and we are looking at, I know y'all are missing, Are You Serious? And Dang Dog. It's going to be, my mama watches this show, so I can't say nothing bad, but with all the craziness that's going on, I suspect Dang Dog and Are You Serious are going to be a little too minor to indicate our anger, all of our reactions to the craziness that's emanating out of Washington, D.C. We'll be taking the gloves off with that in a few weeks. We want to talk about a lot of social justice things that occurred during the year of 2020. With the backdrop of the COVID-19 virus, with that as a backdrop, we discovered that on the outskirts of Atlanta suburb that in early March, I'm trying to bring my timeline back up. I'm having some difficulties. Man, this technology, we live by it or we almost don't survive by it. And I'm trying to bring it up so that I can get my timeline back up. We learned that a young man was shot down, murdered, just literally murdered in Georgia because they thought that he was doing something, that he was shooting. That he was stealing something in a vacant house, and all of that with all of our attention on the coronavirus that was beginning at this point to shut down the country. We soon learned about the death of Ahmaud Arbery. Ahmaud Arbery would go on and they were quickly. Georgia did have a quick justice system, unlike what they did with this president when he was facing a system, and his murderers were brought to justice. Let's look at that videotape.
I'm going to go ahead and address each one of these verdict forms separately. The first verdict form I have is the state of Georgia versus Travis McMichael. Mr. McMichael, please stand. Verdict is as follows. In the Superior Court of Glenn County, state of Georgia, the state of Georgia versus Travis McMichael, case number CR 000433. Jury verdict form. Count 1, malice murder. We, the jury, find the defendant, Travis McMichael, guilty. I'm going to ask that whoever just made an outburst be removed from the court, please.
Little been known to many of us. When did you find out about the about his death, Marlowe?
Shortly when the rest of the world found out, when it came out in the news, and I heard it through some underground channels that I speak with. I mean, that right there could have been me. And when I heard about that, it was heartbreaking. And I just kept saying to myself, how many more young black men must die and die in this way before America wakes up and realizes that there's something terribly wrong? This man was hunted down.
Yes.
The men who hunted him down were modern day slave catchers.
That's right. That's right.
They took it upon themselves, just like George Zimmerman took it upon himself to take the life of Trayvon. They see us black men as a threat. We are a threat to them for whatever reason. And he was just jogging, you know, like I go out for a jog all the time, you know, and now since that happened, I don't do that no more. I go with a friend or someone. But that right there was just one of the most saddest things. And we're living in a Christian society where people are calling themselves Christians. Would Jesus get in his car and hunt someone down? I don't think so.
That was, I think that showed that the arrogance of people in this nation and how they looked at a black life, that it was dispensable. And at best, if he had stolen something, to shoot him down. It was just encouraging to see. I think that verdict was rendered within a year of the because they were brought to justice. They were imprisoned. It took a while before these guys were even arrested and incarcerated without bond.
Yeah,
and I think that may have caused the court proceedings to escalate. And as you could see the reaction, there was utter surprise that in Georgia, 3 white men would be convicted of basically second-degree murder in the murder of a black man. And,
Yeah.
And Marlowe, before we could even, this is all coming with the backdrop of COVID. And you mentioned the Zimmerman, Trayvon shooting down. And before we could even think about it, this occurred.
Yes, it occurred. And one thing that I found interesting doing that, we were so upset as a people, as a culture, black, white, green, Jew, don't matter. Everybody was upset about what happened. Then people took to the streets and started protesting and marching and demanded justice for Ahmaud Arbery, even with the threat that they could catch COVID and die.
Before we really got the mass protest, let's see what happened next.
Convicted in the killing of George Floyd has lost his court battle to have his conviction tossed out. A Minnesota Court of Appeals upheld the second-degree murder conviction of Derek Chauvin. His lawyers claimed massive pretrial publicity made it impossible for him to get a fair trial. The appeals court sided with prosecutors, though, who called it one of the most transparent and thorough trials in U.S. history. Chauvin is right now serving a 22.5-year prison sentence.
Madam Producer, show the still that precipitated that verdict. And we're not going to show out of respect, and I don't know if I could even take it again, seeing George Floyd lying there. But there's Derek Chauvin with his knee over his neck, and and he held him down for, what was it, 8 minutes?
Yeah, it was about 8 minutes and 15 seconds, I believe, something like that.
Unbelievable. And you saw he was quickly brought to justice. Keith Ellison brought him. He prosecuted that case himself. He was the state's attorney general of Minnesota. He prosecuted this case himself. He will go on and be prosecuted and found guilty in federal court. And he's lost his first round of appeals. That clip demonstrated. But I just want to ask you, can you even believe that Elon Musk and others are floating the idea of Derek Chauvin being given a pardon from the federal? They can't do anything about the state court, but being given a pardon from it's a simultaneous sentencing. That they're trying to say that the federal convictions he should get a pardon from.
I cannot imagine that. But when I hear it, I have to remind myself, where does Elon Musk come from? Where are his roots? His roots are in apartheid South Africa. That's what he grew up in. He grew up in seeing people be oppressed. He is a Nepo baby, as they call them. As his father said, Elon never went without. He went to school every day in a Rolls Royce. So it doesn't surprise me. To me, honestly, I would say some other things, but I won't since we're live. But I believe he has some sympathies for white nationalism, because anybody that would want Derek Chauvin free clearly has problems deep within themselves. After witnessing what he did to George Floyd, why would anybody want someone like that free? The reason they say that, because they know that that type of news excites a certain base of people.
Yes.
And that's what they want to keep doing. Those base of people are the let's build the wall people. That base of people are the people that think the Proud Boys who invaded the Capitol did nothing wrong. So it doesn't surprise me. We will hear more things like that come out. We just have to remember that these are dog whistles. And Derek Chauvin got just exactly what he deserved. He doesn't ever deserve to see the light of day. He
really, really shouldn't. I think you mentioned protests, and let's see the video. Let's now all of this, of course, we got Ahmaud Arbery's. This is prior, of course, to we did skip forward a year to the verdict in his case. But all of this is going on, and America is finding out about this death. Now the George Floyd thing is right in our face, and Elon Musk is putting it in our face again 5 years later by even floating the idea of a pardon for Chauvin. Let's look at how America and the world reacted to this atrocity in Minneapolis.
For the 12th night in a row, a coast-to-coast call to action. Turning violent in Portland, Oregon, where police clashed with protesters well into the night. And in Seattle, where police appeared to clear protesters with flashbangs after the police chief ordered the suspension of tear gas and crowd control Friday. But those violent outbursts that often overshadow the beginning of this national inflection point, now mostly absent. Waves of peaceful protest marched on, bigger than ever before.
No more silence. No peace.
From Washington's newly named Black Lives Matter Plaza to San Francisco's Golden Gate Bridge, to Philadelphia, where one couple even stopped to get married. Meanwhile, police in Buffalo defending a use of force.
We want you to share this program out. We're a little behind in asking you to share this and tag this program to your friends and tell them about it after the fact. This is one of the more consequential programs that you see on the dialogue. Marlowe, you actually started a chapter of Black Lives Matter. Was it kind of based after the George Floyd atrocity?
Yeah. I'm the co-founder of Pasco County Black Lives Matter. I founded it with 3 other women who were strong women who came to me and said, "Hey, we know you have some organizing skills. You work a lot in the community with the people. We want to start this chapter because we are seeing what's happening to George Floyd, and we're seeing it in our own communities." And we started our local chapter, and I believe we participated in over 160 marches after the death of George Floyd. And it was an interesting time where, I myself was firsthand thrown into the system of corruption with police and justice departments and things like that. But I'll say this, it was an honor. It was an honor to take part and be a leader of something that helped inspire people in my own community. It was inspiring to see after the death of George Floyd, which is sad that we had to see someone die to get this type of attention back to Black Lives Mattering. It was exciting to see people coming together. I've seen all type of people come together, Jews, Palestinians, blacks, white, gays, all type of people coming together in solidarity, working to try to end systematic racism, which we know is very hard to do because it's systematic. But when I was a leader, that was something we were aiming to do at the local level, like, making sure all of our police officers had body cams. We had an issue where some police departments and municipalities had no body cams, but had a lot of complaints. So, we were instrumental in making sure our local policing agencies had body cams, and local police that were sympathizing with Proud Boys and white supremacists were instrumental in making sure they were no longer working in our community. And that's some of the good things that came out of it.
You won't believe this. We're going to go right back and talk more about the George Floyd. But in the midst of all of that, there was another tragedy that unfolded out of Louisville, Kentucky. Let's look at the videotape.
The pain is raw across the U.S. after a Kentucky grand jury's decision not to directly charge police officers for the killing of Breonna Taylor. In Louisville, where a botched police raid on the 26-year-old's home ended in her death, protesters demanding justice remained in the streets for a 4th straight night, some demonstrators defying the citywide curfew. The police department says multiple fires were set, windows smashed, and buildings vandalized. More than 24 people were arrested. But the mayor says it's worth emphasizing most of the protests have been peaceful.
Overall, it's been peaceful, with thankfully no one hurt. I'm mindful that many in our community are hurting and angry about the decisions announced this week, and I and LMPD absolutely support your First Amendment right to express those sentiments.
The developments in Louisville have been met with profound anger nationwide over the systems protesters say are designed to shield police from accountability.
Now, chronologically, this occurred prior to the George Floyd situation being caught on video. One of the things, Marlowe, we've not mentioned in here, and I like the point that you made, and I want to come back to the point that you made about the universal protest. When Breonna Taylor was killed in Louisville, it was kind of downplay because it didn't get like the Ahmaud Arbery death. It did not get out.
Yeah.
But remember that Colin Kaepernick basically lost a lucrative career because he took a knee saying that we need to do this until America stops, until there's something done with our policemen that our lives stop becoming so easily expendable.
Yeah.
And I mean, we had just three deaths, two police involved. And when our show first premiered, one of the first guests we had was the pastor that our family's pastor while we were in seminary in Louisville. And in the midst of a pandemic, they formed a ministry that went down to where they were protesting down around the Jefferson County Courthouse in Louisville. It was a nightly occurrence, and they went down and basically ministered to the people. They gave food, they gave drink, they evangelized or socialized and everything. I thought that was such an awesome ministry. I was trying to pull the clip where he talked about that unique experience, but we couldn't pull that up in time. But the protest movement, if you'll remember, the governor of this state rapidly started introducing laws trying to inhibit protest. And one of the things that happened was that the vice president for the Miami Heat, I can't think of his name, he's an African-American brother, strongly came out against the Miami Police Department's reaction to the protests. And the protests, as you so correctly pointed out, was not just solely African-American. It was very universal in concept. Were marching and down to the Miami Police Department, and they were met with less than pleasant resistance. And he came out and spoke out against it. He later came back in an amending thing. The Miami Heat agreed to bring in consultants to help, along with others. They came up with a grant to help train the Miami Police Department on police relations. I thought that was one of the positive things, along like some of the positive that you listed earlier out of that. And my brother, who's my partner in this show, was one of the ones. He's a retired police officer, dedicated to community. And Quentin Williams they trained over a series of about 3 years, groups of policemen. So some positive things came out, but we sadly lost people. The thing I liked about the George Floyd protest was that it was not just in the South. It was just not in the inner city. Black people didn't go and burn their own businesses. Everybody came together. And that's the thing that they try to not show. They try to make Black Lives Matter, and they want to align it with Antifa and make it as the same thing they did with the Civil Rights Movement, and saying that Dr. King was inspired by communists and those kinds of things. Being on the front line, what was your reaction to those kind of accusations?
Being on the front lines and being in the trenches, it was rubbish. Where I'm from, all our protests were absolutely peaceful. The only time that they did not become peaceful is when we had motorcycle gangs ride in, Proud Boys ride in and surround us and start making things unpleasant, scaring us. It was very reminiscent of what the Klan did when they would ride up on horses and light up crosses and, try to scare you out of town. And in the words of my ancestors and the way our group was led, we're not going to let nobody turn us around. And we would march right to the police station, and then the Proud Boys would follow us there and accost us and all these things. But one thing I noticed is that they who have the powers try to tend to change the narrative. They quickly did try to say, oh, Black Lives Matter, you guys are burning your own cities and you're terrorists and you're Antifa and you're this and that. And no. We're normal people. We have 9-to-5 jobs. We work. And we're Black people, white people. We're all standing up saying we're just tired of Black people being murdered. We're tired of that being the norm. We're tired of every day waking up, seeing another Black person shot, killed, and nothing being done about it. It took them almost a month to bring those people to justice that killed Ahmaud Arbery. We're still dealing with issues from the Breonna Taylor case. I mean, she was shot and killed in her own home. We're not even safe in our own home. So you mean to tell me the Constitution of the United States, searches and seizures, doesn't apply to African Americans? We can just willy-nilly shoot into people's houses? You know, I don't see that happening in white neighborhoods. My white colleagues are not telling me that, you know, police are just shooting in their houses. It would be an uproar in America if you know, other people of other races started dying like African Americans are dying.
That's I do have some comments about Matt talking about the dual alliance of us coming together and protesting. He's one of our big supporters of this show since we come on. I just one of those protests. I don't remember if it was I saw the Eiffel Tower in the background. Meaning people are protesting as far as Paris about an injustice way across the pond here in Minneapolis and in Louisville and in Georgia, and saying, "Hey, enough is enough. Enough is enough." And this is all going along with the backdrop of COVID-19. That million death occurred here in November with these protests almost daily. I know the Breonna Taylor protests lasted literally a year and a half before it really started kind of dying down and losing its momentum. I think people of good, and you on the front line, and that's why it's so great having you here. People of good intentions, regardless of their ethnicity, their socioeconomic, they just said injustice. It's all this king, injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere, and they responded, and that's what I like. And I like seeing white faces at the front of a lot of these marches. It wasn't a prop. It was as white faces were more. There were more whites in a lot of these marches. I have an affinity and was in school in Minneapolis. Know a little bit about that. Were driven. It was not just so. I think people of just good intentions say, "Hey, this got to stop. We got to do something about it."
This is 2020. We don't. And I had a lot of white friends and colleagues and different friends from different religions and nationalities and in different communities come out. It's the first time I've seen so much unity in 2020 of not just different races and extra people from different sexual orientations getting on. I just seen everybody say, you know what, let's all love each other and let's all be there to support each other. And I think everybody knew that this stuff is wrong. I mean, look what happened. Like you said, protests as far as the Eiffel Tower in London, England, I mean, all over the world and, you know, in different countries. That just speaks volumes to people understanding what is going on here in America. And we're living in a new age. We're living in a digital age. You know, 20 years ago, Derek Chauvin would have got away with that.
Absolutely.
If it wasn't for cell phones and technology and people recording things, we would have never known. We would have never known.
To our audience, we're going over. We're going to stay hopefully within the 5-minute mark. But we've been given the ability to go over just a little bit because this year this was a two-parter, and last week we had the difficulties. So we're going over just a second, and thank you for your indulgence. Thank you, Go Giga. In the midst of these protests in the backdrop, in the midst of active virus that has now killed 1 million people in America, economically, the nation is shut down, the world is shut down. Donald Trump tried to delay the election. He was seeing the polls and he tried to delay it, and he was unsuccessful. And on that Tuesday night in November, the ballots were cast along with mail-in ballots were more popular than ever because of the pandemic, and mail-in ballots and other balloting measures to get people opportunity to represent their intentions netted that the Saturday after the Tuesday night election, Joseph R. Biden of not Pennsylvania, what's the state he's from, Delaware, was elected as president of the United States with America's first female president or vice president, Ms. Kamala Harris, and they would soon assume the White House. But 45 had these comments before the year ended.
Ready to win this election. Frankly, we did win this election. We did win this election.
This is an extremely flammable situation, and the president just threw a match into it.
Some of the most irresponsible comments that a president of the United States has ever made. He has cast doubt on the integrity of the entire electoral process purely for his own personal advantage.
For the president to say, we want all voting to stop, that's what he said. We don't want them finding ballots in the middle of the night, 4 a.m., and then counting them. That's what happens on election night.
And so the year kind of ended with that, and with the protests, the George Floyd protests, Derek Chauvin would be brought to justice within 14 months of what occurred there back in early spring, and of course, so with the killers of Ahmaud Arbery, and we saw the verdict in the Breonna Taylor case. All this was going on while COVID was still active. The nation was still closed down. Florida would this governor would press. He forced the cruise industry back to work in the month of September of 2021, and it was a different life that we lived during that month. Marlowe, I don't know, and I'm not going to ask you, but as a historian, I know you know there were some of the things. What were some of the ties that you saw with 2020 to 1968?
As far as like the protesting, or just in general?
Just a crazy year. I mean, I hate to refer to such, but just
it reminded me kind of in my studies of studying the college protest, studying the Vietnam War, and how that new generation of Americans, those young kids growing up, started to rebel against the system and caused the system discomfort. They started to call out Nixon. They started to call out Lyndon Johnson. And they started to call these people out over the war. And they started to call them out over civil rights. We've seen what happened to Martin Luther King. We've seen what happened to Malcolm X, Marcus Garvey. And we've seen what protests look like. And what 2020 reminded me of is that people listen to the stories of their forefathers. People listen to their grandmas and their uncles talk about marching with Dr. King and Malcolm X and the Garveys. And people took what they learned and they transformed it. They transformed it into something that was called Black Lives Matter. There was transformed into many different things. 8 Can't Wait campaign with D. Ray McKesson. There were so many things that came because of what was happening to us as a people and as a culture and as a country. It seems like there's so many correlations. That's why sometimes being a historian is a little scary, because you feel like you have the gift of foresight in a way, because you're seeing so many things happen. And also with the Trump administration, it gave very dictatorial feelings of someone has lost an election and they're not ceding power to the new person in charge. There's a system, a chain that goes unbroken, that keeps the democracy moving. You lose, you get out, you go live in retirement. This is the first time we've seen a president lose and then can try to convince the world that he didn't lose, and then spend the next 4+ years ramming against the system. I mean, literally ramming against the system. And I think we all know, given to what we've seen now, power is a very, very dangerous thing. You have the president of the United States and the richest man in the world who have effectively teamed up together. And that right there is so reminiscent of Mussolini, Adolf Hitler. That's the type of things that they had. People gave them power, right? They trusted them. Mussolini got power democratically. He got power through the King of Italy. Hitler got power through the parliament of the Reichstag. But then at some point, these men said, we need more power. And that's what we've seen in 2020, a man that wasn't ready to let go of power. And we're still dealing with the ramifications of that.
6 days into the next year a violent insurrection on the Capitol that resulted either directly or indirectly in six deaths. And that was because of just what you're speaking of, being drunk on power. I just want to mention this. Historians kind of came together and said, well, yeah, there were correlations. No, they weren't. Well, the unrest was because, well, there were protests. And of course, Kent State had occurred and people were still, the Vietnam War was agitating, particularly young America, to the point that the police deaths in America in 2020 were agitating all people of good, and so the streets were in constant rage, and many would suggest that Martin Luther King was assassinated not because he was leading Black people out of oppression into affluence or anything like that, but because he had dared to speak out against the Vietnam War and his influence. So we lost him April the 4th, 1968. We lost Bobby Kennedy June the 6th of 1968. And then there was the Democratic Convention where the protests, because President Johnson decided not to run. However, they were taking their rage out on the Democratic Party. And eventually it's believed that Nixon emerged as the winner of the White House because Humphrey became the nominee, almost like Kamala Harris had done, just with a few more months to prepare for the election, in a relatively close election that he lost. Marlowe, 2020 was quite a year, brother. So glad to have you join us tonight and to share it. You have any parting comments about that, other historical moments that occurred in this nation?
Yes, I do. 2020 was a year definitely for the history books. I'll never forget it. It's when my princess, my darling daughter Raina, was born. I'll never forget it. But on a historical sense and from a historian, it was a year that I believe America woke up again. America consciously woke up again. We've seen things happen that haven't happened in a long time. We were used to seeing and hearing about the protests in the 1960s and the Boyce boycotts and Rosa Parks and Fannie Lou Hamer and Zora Neale Hurston. We're used to hearing about those stories. 2020 reinvigorated those stories. We started seeing the new Malcolm X's and Zora Neale Hurstons emerge in our youth. You know, I became a part of local history here in my own community, leading and co-founding Black Lives Matter. Our lives changed. We all answered the call. And I say the call because this type of work is not easy. You're called to do this work by God Almighty and God Almighty himself. Not everybody can do this work. It's not easy. It turns your hair gray. It stresses you out. You lose friends, family, and loved ones. But it's a sacrifice sometimes that must be made because Martin had to make it. Malcolm had to make it. Medgar Evers had to make it. And they all made it because they wanted us to have a better life. I think that we will continue to fight this fight. We have to realize that our country, our Constitution, and all these things that we hold near and dear are under attack. We have to continue to educate our youth. We have to continue to be a threat. Martin Luther King was assassinated because he became a threat. Malcolm was assassinated because he became a threat. Bobby Kennedy was assassinated because they became a threat to the establishment and to the order of the way that white supremacy wants to run this country. You have to be honest with yourself, America. People are scared because people who were once the majority are becoming the minority. And people that look like you and me will be the majority. And some people are not happy with that. So we have to understand that. We have to educate our friends and family. We have to exercise our God-given rights to make sure we're voting. And if we're not voting, we have to educate people in our communities. Hold town halls. Hold your elected officials accountable. We know what's going on in Washington is unbearable. I can't even watch the news. That's how crazy it's getting. But one thing we must do is stay informed and stay educated. Because as the great Frederick Douglass said, knowledge makes a man unfit to be a slave.
And you know, Marlowe, thank you for joining us tonight. We're going to close out with that. That is the I, as I see it. Marlowe spoke it. I won't speak it. I'll just leave these words. Are you ready to be involved in good trouble? Dialogue with Dozie. We'll see you next Monday night, 8 p.m.